A very good morning, everybody. Today is the third day of our presentations. And today, semester 3 students are going to make presentations on post-colonial studies. Let us have the list of the students who are going to make presentation today. But before we see the list and the topics on which they are going to make presentations, let us have a review. This is the third day, and on the very first 2 days, we have seen that students who are supposed to do various things along with presentations, like they have to do multitasking in terms of self-evaluation, peer evaluation, and you also have to post the timestamps regarding the video so that we get proper chapters also. And we are very happy to see that this time, without any reminders, you all are doing all the work, and we don't have to send you a lot of reminders in WhatsApp to see that your work is done. So, and it is done without error also. So it is good that in first 2 semesters you have learned by the mistakes of your fellow classmates, and now this time, at least on the first 2 days, we have seen that you are not making any mistakes in that. Let us have a look at the things. So you are told to have a review. We have prepared an online rubric in Google Classroom for teachers evaluation, and one is for students evaluation. So students are also making the evaluation in terms of self and peer. And glad to see that it is done quite well. We see first 2 days it is exactly 50%, 40 responses from your side. So there is a good work being reflected without any error. And even in the responses that you have given, quite fairly well, the things are done also by most of you in the evaluation. So no error. So no multiple entries are being seen in any of the cases. That is something really good to see. In last many years, we have not seen that nobody is making any mistake in the evaluation. Then we have this putting the stamps, time stamps. And so once your live streaming is over, you have to put the timestamp in terms of hour, minutes, and seconds. So there also there is no need of any reminder now. Everybody is doing it perfectly well. And so it is easy for me to copy paste all these things in the video. And as you are aware that in the video, when we have the video at the in the description, we get our live stream videos which are there. In the description we find this chapterization. That is why the timestamp is required. So if anybody wants to directly go to any particular kind of presentation of any student, then they can just click on the timestamp and go there. So that is how we get chapterization. This all chapters are being seen in the right column, we can see with your name. So that is the advantage of having timestamp in the description of a long video. These videos are of more than around 3 hours, and that's why it requires chapterization also. So both the work is done quite well by all the students, and we hope that in the remaining 3 days also it will be likewise only. And so once you praise, and then the error starts happening, because we slightly become conscious about the thing, or we feel confident that now we are not making mistake. As soon as we feel that overconfident, we tend to make a mistake. So all these things you have to keep in mind. Then only the things can be done in a proper manner. Okay, so some of the former students who are seeing this, they might be also seeing that it is good, because we have to send lots of reminders to the former students for doing the same kinds of things time and again. Okay, so let us start with this. Today we have post-colonial studies, and let us have a look at the topics. Okay, so we'll start with Aarti's presentation on White Sargasso Sea as a post-colonial novel. A reminder here for capitalization in title. White Sargasso Sea. Sea also should be capital S. Anjali's will be on Fanon's theory of violence. Avani on metafiction in Faux. Bhavyata on symbolic reading in White Sargasso Sea. Drashti's presentation on Frantz Fanon as a post-colonial writer. Gayatri will read on marginalization in Coetzee's Faux. Ghanshyam on market fundamentalism and its effects. Gopi on race and gender in White Sargasso Sea. Hetal's presentation on a comparative analysis of madness and female identity in White Sargasso Sea and the mad women in the attic. And last, for the morning session, will be by Hina, interrogating hybridity, reading in Rise White Sargasso Sea. Okay, so let us start with the first presentation. Aarti, you can start.
Hello everyone. This is the third day of semester 3's presentation. Myself, Aarti Sarvaiya. In this presentation, I am going to deal with this topic, White Sargasso Sea, as a post-colonial novel. This is my personal information. Table of content about the writer, about the novel, uh, about post-colonialism, White Sargasso Sea as a post-colonial novel, and then conclusion and references. Uh, about the writer, Jane Rice was a Western Indian novelist and who is earned acclaim for her early work set in the Bohemian world of Europe in 1920s and 30s, but who stopped writing for nearly 3 decades until she wrote a successful novel set in the West Indies. She was encouraged to write by English novelist Maddox Ford. Her first book, a collection of uh, and short stories, The Left Bank, was uh, and followed by the another collection of short stories are like postures. After leaving Mr. Maxine, voyage in the dark, and good morning and midnight. White Sargasso Sea is a novel that reconstructed the earlier life of fictional character Antoinette Cosway, who was Mr. Rochester's maid first wife in Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. Smile, Please, which is his unfinished autobiographical work, which was published in 1979, and these are some other notable works written by her. About the novel, White Sargasso is a novel written by Jane Rees. It is published in 1966. A well-received work of fiction, it takes its theme and main character from the novel Jane Eyre by Gerald Bronte. The book details the life of uh, Anthony Mason, a West Indian who marries an unnamed man in Jamaica and returns with him to his home in England, who is locked in a loveless marriage and settled in an unhospitable climate. Antoinette goes mad and it frequently violent. Her husband Rochester confines her to the attic of his house at Thornfield. Only he and Grace Poole, the attendants he had hired to care of her, know of Eternity's existence. The reader gradually learns that Eternity's unnamed husband, Mr. Rochester, later to become a beloved of Jane Eyre. Much of the actions of novel takes place in the West Indies. The first and third, this novel is divided in three sections. First and third sections are narrated by Eternity, and the middle section is narrated by her husband Rochester. About postcolonialism. Postcolonialism is the historical period or state of affair representing the aftermath of Western colonialism, and the term can also be used to describe the concurrent project to reclaim and rethink the history and agency of people subordinated under the various forms of imperialism. Postcolonialism singles the possible future of overcoming colonialism. Yet, new form of domination or subordination can come in the wake of such changes, including new form of global empire. Postcolonialism should be confused with the claim that the world we live in now is actually devoid of colonialism. Postcolonialism theories and histories have been concerned with investigating the various trajectory of modernity as understood and experienced from the range of philosophical, cultural, and historical perspective. They have been particularly concerned with engaging with the ambiguous legacy of enlightenment as expressed in the social, political, economical, scientific, legal, and cultural thought beyond Europe itself. The legacy is ambiguous according to postcolonial theory because the age of enlightenment was also the age of empire, and the connection between these two historical epochs is more than incidental. White Sargasso as a post-colonial novel. White Sargasso is a fundamental postmodern and postcolonial novel, which is completely composed as an answer to Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. Uh, Through her deconstructionist technique, Rice adeptly plays upon the subject, character, and general plotline of Jane Eyre, using every one of the gift and spoof of pesty strategy of postmodern novel, which stamps the White Sargasso as an impeccable post-colonial satire of Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. In her revising of fundamental pieces, of Jane Eyre, Rise offers voice to intentionally hushed Jane Eyre's characters with a post-colonial endeavor, to uncover the other side of connected character and the story. White surrogacy is emerged as a part of post-colonial literature, where both national and religion consciousness tries to assert the different from the imperial center. Um, White surrogacy is considered Rice's masterpiece, contribute to the era of post-colonial literature. The novel is regarded as the prequel of Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, and it regarded as the most intensively studied and instantly explored the English novel. It has been captured the world's attention and aroused a heated discussion among the literary circle. White surrogacy can be categorized under the merit perspectives, namely a feminist criticism, post-colonial criticism, or a perspective of double decolonization. Jane Rice portrays the characters of Rochester and Antonity to describe and define the wider race relation typical of a West Indian, where European born or lived there, educated to conceive of England as a home where culturally marked and excluded as inferior colonies. At the same time, they were racially and institutionally privileged in relation to the African people brought there as slaves to work in plantation occupying a position of eliminate White surrogacy through a post-colonial novel is much more complex in terms of the identity of nationhood as the main character of the novel. Uh, Antonity is a white Creole inhabitant of Jamaica just after the Emancipation Act is passed. She is at once neither English or Jamaican, and is home in nation that is not her original homeland of England. This search for identity within our nation itself, however, is not unusual within a post-colonial novels. A major feature of post-colonial literature is concerned with place and displacement. It is here that the special post-colonial crisis of identity comes into being in concern with the development of recovery of an affective identifying relationship between the self and place. Uh, in this novel, she focuses on three major issues like slavery, male dominance, and displacement. And rise. It will also discuss the writer's intention on stating this issue in her novel. In the novel, there is a constant rift between the Creoles and Jamaicans. Black people continue to serve the Creoles even after the passing of the Emancipation Act in 1833. Part one of the novel shed light on the ex-slaves who had worked on the sugar cane plantation of rich Creoles. Although the Emancipation Act had freed the slaves when Antonity was still a child, compassion of black workers on the island was overdue, and the servants were still treated by their white employers. Rice also explores the theme of woman subjugation, subjugation, subjugation to male authority in white surrogacy. In the novel, female characters are introduced as a fable being who are dependent on the men around them for legal, sexual, and financial securities. When Antoniette's father passed away, her mother relies on her second marriage to bring back her status in society. She wants to escape from the colibri and regain the status among her friends. When Antoniette's father dies, there we can see the male dominant. There we can see the status of woman. She do a second marriage instead of raises her child lonely. The men in the novel can be categorized as ultimate opportunists who use their wives as a key to access wealth. Both entity and eternity are dependent on men near to them, like children dependent on their parents. It can be argued that Antonity is a part of black society and always aware as a black of the difference and distance between them. Antonity and Rochester are representative of two cultural worlds, incapable of reciprocal understanding. Um, uh, Rochester is representing the white people, and on the other side, Antonity is represent the black people, and we can also see the difference between both of the characters. And Jane Rice, white surrogacy is a product of post-colonialism, and the use of she also used the language and the language of this is also representing the extraordinary ability to subvert the ideologies of the West. Chandra Rice uses in her novel both standard British English and Jamaican varieties of English as the language of periphery. Genderized in white surrogacy by means of language emphasizes the construct the setting the Creole, Black, and European identity. The race relationship of the novel. Rochester, representative of European discourse and power, rejects the variety of English, and he refuses Creole as a language which he dislikes and cannot understand. Conclusion. Rice, with the help of colonial Caribbean background, uh, paved her way into the world of literature with the idea of sharing her modernist style and themes via her literary work. She managed to link her text with the readers by introducing modern themes like destitution, marginalized identity, alienation, oppression, and quest for freedom. Her white surrogacy depicts many post-colonial at modern issue that many can relate to. She has planned the novel by reconciling the plot with her own experience. Issues such as slavery, male dominance, displacement are still a part of our world, but at the different level. The novel is widely studied across the colleges and universities due to its depth and relevancy of the era till end date. These are the references. Thank you. Now you can ask me question.
Aarti, my question is, what is the exploration of the theme of colonialism in White Sargasso?
Uh, in Wild Surrogacy, the theme of colonialism is described by the female, mostly by the female characters like eternity and entity, because after the freedom from the slavery, they are still wanting someone who can rule over them. They cannot even imagine the freedom for themselves.
Aarti, my question for you is that what role does identity play in the novel, particularly in relation to the issue of race and nationality?
In the issue of race and nationality, identity play a vital role because um, uh, we can find the race theme of race when between the character of Rochester and Eternity because as I mentioned that Rochester is represent the black white people and Eternity is represent the black people and both are Rochester rule over her wife who is belonging black people black community and he also uh, he also rule over her and behave with her as a slave. Thank you.
Good morning. Myself Anjali Rathod, Season 3 Presentation Day 3, in which I am going to deal with my presentation topic on Frantz Fanon's theory of violence. This is my personal information, table of contents, introduction of the author. Fanon's main elements, thoughts are what is violence, importance of violence, theory of violence, and conclusion. Introduction. Frantz Fanon, in a full name, Frantz Omer Fanon. He was Western Indian psychoanalyst and social philosopher known for his theory that some neurios are socially generated and for his writing on behalf of the national liberation of colonial peoples. Uh, Franz Fanon perceived colonialism as a form of domination whose necessary goal for success was the rewarding for the of the world or indigenous peoples. He saw violence as the defining characteristics of colonialism. But if violence was a tool of social control, it may also, argued Fanon, be a cathartic reaction to the oppression of colonialism and necessary tool of political engagement. One of the Fanon's most notable works is Black Skin, White Marks, in which he explores the psychological effect of racism and colonialism on black individuals. Uh, Franz Fanon has been made the symbol of conflict. We must see that he also stood for reconciliation. Fanon also who did not trust fervor must be confronted if we are to understand the Fanon who later preached violence. He always remembered his West Indian origins is while trying to identify himself first as a Frenchman and later as an anti-French Algerian rebel. Frantz Fanon was born on July 1925 in Fort-de-France, the capital of the French colony of Martinique. After receiving his early education, he joined French army in 1943 in response to the call of General de Gaulle to save France. After the Second World War, he went to France in 1947 to receive higher education in medicine and stayed there for 5 years up to 1952. It was during this period that he wrote his first book, Black Skin, White Marks, which was published in 1952. Uh, he came to Algeria in 1953 to work as a psychiatrist and dedicated himself to the cause of Algerian independence. Uh, he was expelled from Algeria in 1957 from 1957 till his death in 1961. He worked as a professional revolutionary. It was during this last phase of his life that he published most of his works. Fanon's writings have had a profound impact on scholars, activists, and movements advocating for racial and social justice around the world. Fanon's main elements, thoughts are colonial dehumanization, psychological impact of colonization, and violation and decolonization. Uh, I- uh, in these, his most main elements, thoughts are his stress on black consciousness and his revolt against resist colonialism, his belief in and concern for creating a new humanism and the incorporation of existentialist and Marxist influences. And the discovery of peasantry and lumpen proletariat is a new agents of revolution in the third world, and finally his glorification of violence. What is violence? Ac- uh, According to Jaha, Fanon defines the term violence in clear-cut terms. He has used it in more senses than one. For example, he has used it in the sense of physical injury. This is one sense in which he refers to colonial regime as being created and maintained by violence. Fanon writes, their first encounter was worked by violence and their existence, that is to say, the exploitation of the native by the settler was carried on by dint of a great array of bayonets and cannon. Frantz Fanon, in her seminal work, The Wretched of the Earth, explores the concept of violence in the context of anti colonial struggles. He argues that violence is not only a physical act but also psychological and existential phenomenon within the colonized individual and society. And Fanon contends that colonialism is inherently violent as it dehumanizes and oppresses the colonized people. Fanon's meaning of violence is not quite clear. It is fraught with ambiguities. His violence means anything except non-violence. His concept of violence encompasses almost the entire range of political pressure, including physical or psychological injury, aggression, military coercion, power, or force. Uh, he uh, he writes, the hecatombs are an indications that between oppressor and oppressed, everything can be solved by forces. Again, while explaining the real nature of violence, Fanon says, we have seen that it is the institution of the colonized masses that their liberations must and can only be achieved by force. Uh, uh, According to Franz Fanon, violence is a tool that can serve as a cathartic and transformative force. He sees violence as a way for the colonized people to resist the dehumanization imposed upon them by the colonizers. Importance of violence. Uh, Fanon attaches a great importance to violence on several grounds. First, Fanon maintains that it is only through violence that man creates himself. For revolutionary violence free man's consciousness and creates a new man. Fanon's idea is quite different from that of Hegel and Marx. While according to Hegelman is the product of his thought, Marx maintains that man is the product of labor, but Fanon says that man produces himself through violence. According to Sartre, Fanon makes it clear that irrepressible violence is neither sound and fury. There is also another sense in which man creates himself through violence. Fanon maintains that colonized man finds his freedom in and through violence. Fanon uses violence as a catharsis. He argues that violence is a cleansing force. It frees the colonized from his feeling of inferiority and humiliation. To quote Fanon, at the level of individuals, violence is a cleansing force. It frees the native from his inferiority complex and from his despair and inaction. It makes him fearless and restores his self-respect. Thus, Fanon believes in the purificatory role of violence. Fanon glorifies violence because it acts as a unifying force for the native people. He maintains that it is not enough for the colonized to gain liberation as consciousness. This solidarity can be built only by violence. It binds the people together to form a collective individual. Fanon writes the practice of violence blinds them together as a whole, since each individual forms a violent link in the great chain, a part of the great organism of violence which has surged upwards in reaction to to the settlers' violence in the beginning. Fanon maintains that violence pays not only during the colonial struggles for independence, but also in the second phase of decolonization. The second phase of decolonization is the period of national reconstruction and building up the nation. The solidarity of the people gained during the struggle for independence helps in the liquidation of regionalism and rebellism. Uh, During the period of national reconstruction, the difference is that while during the colonial period, the people are called upon to fight against oppression. After national liberation, they are called upon to fight against poverty, illiteracy, and underdevelopment. Thus, the struggle goes on, and the people realize that life is an unending contest. Fanon extols violence because it is a key to social truth and actions. He conceives of violence as a process in which two phases can be distinguished. In the first phase, there is a spontaneous outburst of violence without organization, organized and politicized. The first phase of violence is motivated by the racial hatred, the second by the political indoctrination, and the first releases the pent up feelings, the second raises consciousness, and the one tends to do away with the psychological alienation of the colonized. The other change is the capitalist colonial structures which produce such alienation. Violence committed by the people, violence organized and educated by its leaders makes it possible for the masses to understand social truths and gives the key to them. Without the struggle, there is nothing but a fancy dance parade and the blare of the trumpets. A theory of violence. According to Franz Fanon, he gave some theory on violence, like colonial violence, psychological violence, counter violence is a liberation and a transition to a post colonial society. Uh, uh, Fanon's theory of violence is open to searching criticisms, and several serious objections may be raised against it. To begin with, though Fanon gives much importance to violence, he does not define it in clear cut terms. He uses it in a sense that embodies the connotations we associate with injury, coercion, force, power, and the like. In fact, Fanon Fanon's violence used to explain everything. Explain everything explains nothing. The loose usage of such a critical term weakens its analytical utility. Fanon argued that colonialism is inherently violent. Voluntary violence may degenerate into uh, political masochism. The shortcomings of any celebrations of violence are not only limited to the level of individual psychosis. They may pose problems to the social and political system. Fanon examined the psychological violence inflicted upon the colonized. He discussed colonialism leads to feelings of inferiority, self-hatred, and alienation among the colonized individuals. Fanon maintains that violence recreates man by liberating his consciousness. It is true that Fanon is not alone in his appeal to violence as a liberating force for men. Nevertheless, violence is not the only way to achieve liberations of consciousness has been admitted by Fanon himself when he writes, it is clear that other peoples have come to the same conclusion in different ways. We know for sure today that in Algeria the test of force was inevitable, but other countries, through political action and through the work of clarification undertaken by a party, have led their people to the same results. Uh, Fanon believed that violence, when strategically employed, could lead to the overthrow of colonial powers. He also stressed the importance of transitioning from a violent struggle to just an egalitarian post-colonial society. The end goal was not the perpetuation of violence, but the establishment of a society where all individuals could live in dignity and equality. Uh, Finance is also mistaken in regarding violence as a cause of colonial alienation. He does not say in what precise manner violence causes the alienation of the native. We know, for instance, that in the colonized society like Algeria, the violence of the colonizers was not the only form of violence, and that the colonized was also violent. How can we be sure that a particular alienation expressed by a particular person is not the result of natives' own violence, different from the violence of the colonial regime? Fanon's thesis that violence is a unifying force is questionable on several grounds. First, violence is the result of a psychological state of mind. Uh, which is wanted by anger, hatred, divisions, and fighting. People who suffer from such psychological distortions may forge a bond of unity for a time being against a common enemy, but there is no guarantee that such unity will continue after the disappearance of the common enemy. Second, real unity is possible where there is a harmony and friendship, and this cannot be secured on the basis of violence. Third, the gang which is engaged in inflicting violence on foreigners may adopt the same device of injuring one another in dealing with its own members. Fanon's theory of violence is rooted in the understanding of violence as a response to systematic colonial oppression and a means through which the colonized can reclaim their humanity, and he saw violence as a tool for liberation. Yet he was mindful of its complexities and the need for a just and a peaceful post-colonial future. And his ideas continued to provoke discussions about the ethics and effectiveness of resistance, especially in the face of oppressive regimes. A conclusion: to sum up, it may therefore be said that the general applicability of Fanon's theory of violence is doubtful. Fanon has somewhat limited historical experience as he proceeds mainly from the experience of Algeria. There is much evidence to suggest that violence may be necessary in African countries which are or were dominated by white settler groups, as in Algeria, Rhodesia, South Africa, and the Portuguese territories. Fanon's theory of violence is a queer mixture of revolutionary romanticism and utopianism, of revolutionary integrity and reckless venture, of heroic self-sacrifice and political naivete. He attempts to foist violence upon the people from above. He forgets that such type of violence is bound to end in intrigue and conspiracy. In fact, revolution must be the achievement of something new, but the violence and the effects of violence, suspicion, resentment, and hatred are things only too familiar, too hopelessly unrevolutionary. This is references. Thank you. If you have any query, then you can ask.
Anjali, how does Fanon's theory of violence relate to the broader question about power, oppression, and social change?
Uh, Franz Fanon's theory of violence in his work The Wretched of the Earth, he uses the all like a power, oppression, and social change. It is a deep link between the all power, oppression, and social change, and power dynamics dehumanizes in social injustice.
Anjali, for you, my question is, what is the role of violence in the psychological and emotional liberation of the oppressed, according to Fanon's perspective?
The role of violence, according to Franz Fanon, he can serve as a cathartic cathartic relevance. Cathartic relevance in psychological and emotional liberation, in in social justice and power of oppression in the society. Thank you.
Very good morning to you all. I'm Jani, and today I'm going to deal with the topic Metafiction Info. Here is my personal information, and here is the points which I'm going to deal with today. Definition: Metafiction, uh, Robinsonite tradition and reconsideration, decoding the significance of the title, the foe in Coetzee's novel, and conclusion. Definition: The meaning of a metafiction shown in the Cambridge Dictionary, writing about imaginary characters and events in which the process of writing is discussed or described. The Patricia Waugh, in her book Metafiction, says that the theory and the practice of self conscious fiction defines metafiction. Metafiction is a form of fiction that emphasizes its own narrative structure in a way that continually reminds the audience that they are reading or viewing fictional work. Metafictional is a self-conscious about language, literary form, and the storytelling, and works of metafiction directly or indirectly draw attention to their status or as artifacts. Metafiction is frequently used as a form of parody or a tool underlying the literary convention and explore the relationship between literature and reality, life and art. Metafictional, reshaping the novel. Clearly, Saucer's distinction between signs and signifier and signified is relevant here, that meta language is a language which function as a signifier to another language which becomes its signified. The term metafiction as a novel reflective tendency, it's generally attributed to the fiction and figures of life by the American critic and the self-conscious novelist William Glass in 1970. Critics may argue that metafiction signals the decline of exertion of the novel as a genre. It proponents view it as a herald of the novel's renavigation. We can well observe the foe with the comparison to the Robinson Crusoe, and as well one can observe the Pamela and Shamela conflicts also as a metafictional reading of the works literature. And Robinsonade tradition and reconsideration. Although it is well established fact that Defoe's work has served as a wellspring of inspiration for numerous artistic creation throughout the centuries, the 20th century also saw the emergence of other literary works in the Robinsonade tradition. Uh, here there is a term of a Robinsonade in which, according to the Cudden, the term Robinsonade as a story of adventures of a person standard, excuse me, adventures of a person stranded on the desert island. One can well observe the Alchemist and the Life of Pi as the theory as the term of Robinsonade. D. Atwell regards the reconsideration of Robinson's story as a perfect ground for creating an allegory. In what it perhaps its most allegorical work, Coetzee replaced Robinson Crusoe as an account of relations between institution of letters folk, the colonial storyteller seeking authorization through the metropolis, and the silenced voice of the colonized subject, Friday. Decoding the significance of a title "Foe" in Coetzee's novel. Coetzee calls his novel "Foe," referring to the author for Robinson Crusoe already in the title of his work. The pun with the title connects the author of Robinson Crusoe, Daniel Defoe, with the element false and opponent. Therefore, there does not have to be a definite interpretation of the title as pun, as all of those mentioned above are more or less an aspect of facet Coetzee's novel and its relationship to the classic Robinson Crusoe. Uh, they all are related to the fact that historiography is always culturally influenced and in the favor of the group who actually writes the history. It is very common that we have learned in a post-colonial studies as well in the cultural studies that who owns the power, who has the pen, and who is going to tell the story, that defines that what can be the story and what will be the story. And here also in this novel there is a question that has been raised, that who is writing the story and in which way he or she is writing the story. He or she might be writing the story to make audience happy and to sell their books. Additionally, Foe was also seen as the Coetzee's most overly metafictional text, post-colonial reworking of Robinson Crusoe, with unwrites his colonial intertext. All of these interpretations have as a common dominator the fact that they all regard Coetzee as a master in reshaping and dissimulating postmodern issue in the apparent overt fiction. Conclusion. In conclusion, J.M. Coetzee 4 is a remarkable work for metafiction that not only remains and reworks as a classic literary text, but also challenges the traditional conventions of storytelling. Through self-reflexivity, parody, and deconstruction, Coetzee invites reader to think critically about the act of storytelling, representation of marginalized voices, and the relationship between the literature and reality. Four serves as a prime example of how metafiction can be powerful tool for re-evaluating and reshaping narrative traditions in a post-colonial feminist context. Here am I work cited. And now, is there any question?
What are the ethical considerations when using humor and metafiction to critique sensitive and controversial subject in literature?
Obviously, the ethical consideration might be the to avoid sensitive writing, and if even though you are writing sensitive, then you have to be very gentle with your topic, and you have to tell the story in the way that it can be heard to the people. That's why the term metafiction and satire, allegory, all these terms are working in these days, and this is how we are feeling free to express ourselves, and we are safe by using this type of writing, and so that's it.
concept of metafiction impact our understanding of storytelling and the relationship between author's text and readers?
Obviously, the when you are reading the any satirical or metafictional work, then you have to know the background of the story, background of the writer, and in which way he is writing. When you are reading this novel, uh, and the Midnight's Children, and novel of Pamela Shamila, and while you are reading this type of stories, you have to know the background, and after that you have come to know that what is the story, what is the satire, what is the allegory in this. So this is how it also includes the writer's way of telling the story. Writer has to be very clear about what he is writing. So when he is clear, then readers might also be clear about the reading and the understanding of his work. So that this is how metafictional and satire, allegory, and all these works, all this genre are working. That's all. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Bhavyata Kukadiya, and today is the third day of our presentation. And my presentation topic is symbolic reading in white Sargasso Sea. So let's start. Here is my personal information. Table of content, author's introduction, brief introduction of the novel, racial conflicts in the novel, symbolic reading of Annette, and symbolic reading of Christophe, and conclusion, and then references. The author of the novel, Jen her full name was Ella Gwendolyn Reese Williams. She was British Caribbean author. Uh, her works often explore themes related identity, displacement, and the challenges of being a person of mixed racial and cultural heritage in a colonial and post-colonial world. Uh, uh, her writing is known for its lyrical prose and its focus on the interior lives of her character, her exploration of the complexity of identity, especially for women in a patriarchal society and individual caught between culture, and has made her significant figure in post-colonial literature. Her work has had a lasting influence on contemporary literature and continues to be studied and admired for its depth and insight into human condition. Here is her first works, famous works, which I mention here. The brief introduction about the novel White Sargasso Sea, the author Jane Rice, published in 1966, is a compelling literary work, serves as a prequel Harriet Bronte timeless classic. It offers readers to fresh perspective on the character of Bertha Mason. It is White Sargasso Sea delves deep into the multifaceted dimension of uh, Antian, Anton's Antoinette identity as a Creole woman of mixed racial and cultural heritage. She grappled with the challenges of belonging and acceptance in a world marketed by colonialism and racial tension. Her troubled marriage to Mr. Rochester, the enigmatic character from Jane Eyre, further adds to the intricates of her life. And Jane Eyre's writing in White Sargasso Sea is celebrated for its rich, evocating prose, which vividly conveys the thoughts and emotions of the characters. It invites readers to navigate the complex landscape of identity and displacement and cultural conflict, delivering thought-provoking narrative that responds with contemporary readers. So, racial conflicts in this novel. In Jamaica, there were three main racial groups: white, who control everything but were a small minority; blacks, primarily consisting of former slaves, and the Creoles. The Creoles descended from European colonies and slave owners, but were born on the island, creating a unique class that had uh, disappeared after the emancipation of slaves in 1833. The freed individual still faced hardship, becoming indentured servant for whites, leading to intense conflict. And Antoniette and her mother Annette, descended from French colonies, were caught in a challenging position. Here, their asserted ancestry as a slave owners made them disliked by blacks, while European whites saw them as inferior due to the supposed uh, contamination and their European blood. Christophane, representing the black population, faced colonialization and inferiority, but never stopped asserting himself. This highlights that woman can be oppressed but not silenced. uh, Symbol Annette as a symbol of Creole whites. According to Leo, he mentioned in his article, Annette is a symbol of revealing racial conflicts as her tragic life is caused by classes between the whites and the blacks, the European whites and the Creole whites. Annette is the second wife to Alexander Causeway and the mistress of the distressed plantation. Newly widowed Annette Causeway has no male protector except her related son and has no earning to support. Uh, Annette has never been approved by the white Jamaican ladies that we can see the dialogue because she pretty like pretty self. Annette is originally from Martinique, which is a French colony, against the background that the blacks are freed from the whites and the emancipation cannot change attitudes for so many years, and in fact, it realizes the hatred of the blacks for the whites and that have long been suppressed. Antoniette recalls, I never looked any strange Negro. They hated us. They called us white cockroaches. In this, we can see the colonialism in the novel, and the racism also is there. Uh, uh, Annette, Annette and her mother of Antoniette experience a severe decline in her mental and emotional well-being. Her son Pyrrhus' death is the breaking point that sends her into state of despair and grief. Christophine, a character in the story, explained that the Annette madness is a result of her hardship and the suffering. Annette is isolated in mistreated by those in charge of her care, and in these tragic consequences of colonial operation and personal tragedies on Annette's mental state and foreshadows the challenges faced by uh, Antoniette. Here is the second character, Christophane, a symbol of the oppressed but rebellious blacks. Christophane belongs to a class that is exploited and oppressed, but contrary to Annette, she is rebellious and undaunted. She is a symbol standing for the native blacks and fighting against the domination and oppression. Christophine is a strong symbol of support and resistance. She helps the advises Antoinette, showing her the importance of financial independence. Christophine stands against oppression and stands up for what is a right. Christophine is a portrait as a brave fighter for justice in the novel. She denounces Rochester to his face that he is making use of Antoniette and maliciously destroys her and abs- abandons her when Anatoly nearly collapses after Rochester's revenge. Christophine steps up bravely and bitterly criticizes Rochester in the judge voice. Here I mention some dialogues. Rochester is overwhelmed by her imposing manner, and in the last resort he threatens by mentioning calling the police. Even so, Christophine remains fearless and Rochester has to admit to himself her courage. She said that when I looked at her, there was a mask on her face and her eyes were undoubted. She was a fight, I had to admit. In all, Christophine and her fellow blacks, such as Daniel and Emily, are continuously claiming their rights and fighting against the oppression, their existence is always and forever a threat to white colonialism. To conclude, white surrogacy, we found two important symbols, Christopher and second is Annette. Christopher show us how people who are treated unfairly can be strong and stand up for what's right, and she like a role model. And in the other side, other character Annette, on the other hand, teach us about how colonialism can change people and their identity. Here is my references. Now you can ask me a question.
Bhavyata, how do the characters Christopher and Annette in White Sargasso Sea help us understand the different roles and struggles of people in a colonial society?
In the novel White Sargasso, there are two characters, Christopher and Annette, who represent different experience people had in the colonial society. And Christopher represent those who resisted and fought against the oppression, and while Annette represent those caught in the middle of the power struggles, and together they help us the see they help us to see the complex lives of the people during that colonial times. Other-
Bhavyata, how does the symbolism in Sarvaiya see challenges the reframed traditional literary narratives and the colonial representations?
The symbolism in the White Sargasso Sea, the challenges, the usual way of stories and told, and how colonialism shown in literature. It makes us think differently about what we are used to. In the novel, symbols like Christophine and Annette help us to see the colonialism and its effect from new aspects, and they show they're more to the story than what's traditionally told in literature and in history. The book use symbols to make a question the told ways to looking at things to understand colonialism in some new thing and new fresh light. So thank you for listening.
Hello everyone. Today is the third day of presentation season 3, and today is my presentation based on Frantz Fanon as the post-colonial writer. So let's start. This is my personal information. Table of contents. So these are some points which I'm going to discuss in today's presentation.
First is about Frantz Fanon. As you all know that he was a famous post-colonial writer. Frantz Fanon's full name was Franz Omar Fanon. He was born in 1925 and died in 1961. He was a Martinique-born psychiatrist and author. His works, famous works, are Black Skin, White Mask, and The Wretched of the Earth. He supported the Algerian National Liberation Front in Algerian War. His legacy includes significant influence on post-colonial studies and anti-colonial movements. He was a very famous post-colonial writer, but its status changed in 1946 when it became one of the French over his department, Martinique. His parents discussed him from speaking Caroline and generally promote the values of French culture. So he was born in French, so he adapt the cultures of French. It's his own. According to Tracy Nicholas, Frantz Fanon was born in French colony of Martinique, and his family occupies a social position within the Martinican society and could reasonably qualify them as a part of black bourgeois. So he was from upper class of this bourgeois upper class. Frank's father, Casimir Fanon, was a custom inspector, and his mother, Eleanor Madeleine, owned a hardware store in downtown Fort de France, the capital of Martinique. His father and mother, members of the social stroma, tended to strive for assimilation and identification with white French culture. Fanon was raised in the environment, learning French history as his own until his high school years, when he first encountered the philosophy of negritude. So, this philosophy of negritude is based on how black people were colonized by colonizers. And one person, Ain Césaire, this person has a most influence of Frantz Fanon, and he influenced him to towards thinking of this colonization and this philosophy of negritude. This person, Aim Césaire, also was a politician and writer of Algeria. And at the age of 18, to fight with the Free French forces in the waning days of World War II, he was also fought for Algeria. After the war, he stayed in France to study psychiatry and medicines at a university in Lyon. Post-colonial theory has influenced the way we read text, the way we understand nation and transitional histories, and the way we understood the political inclination of our own knowledge as a scholar. Despite frequent critique of outside of the field, post-colonial theory remains one of the key forms of critically humanistic interrogation in both academic in the world. Fanon is a political martyr who died in 1961 before he could witness the birth of independence of Algeria. So Algeria was independent in 1962, and before 1 year, Fanon died, and he fought for this independence. His status near mythic in the scale as a result. To invoke, Fanon is to bring forth a radical worldview dissatisfied with the political present, reproduced full of conformities of past, and consequently in a perpetual struggle for a better future. Abdul Qadir and his fellow writers wisely observe that today we hardly remember Frantz Fanon. His name is confirmed at the age of decolonization. The Epstol of decolonization who predicted the doom of colonization. The psychiatrist from Martinique who advocated the case of Algeria liberation. So he fought for Algerian liberation and freedom. His books, Black Skin, White Mask, and The Wretched of the Earth, conjure image of colonized world. The oppressor and oppressed are dissected on an operation table. The man who introduced us to inhumanity of decolonization, a psychiatrist who came to work for the French in Algeria. The oppression and torture shook in his convictions.
It had been many years since the Third World became independent of Europe colonization. The Third World in undeveloped world or developing world, whether the name may be, the word of confusion and turmoil, poverty, corruption, and instability are its characteristics. He didn't witness the post-colonial world in Algeria. About post-colonialism, so post-colonialism in easy language is that how this world think of politically, educationally, economically, historically, and socially. So, according to Daniel M., postcolonial theory is a body of thought primarily concerned with the accounting for the political, aesthetic, economics, historical, and social impact of Europe. Europe colonized ruler around the world in the 18th through the 20th century. Post-colonial theory takes many different shapes and interventions, but all shares a fundamentally claims that the world we inhabit is impossible to understand except in relation to the philosophy to the European philosophy. We have to understand this means that it is impossible to convince of European philosophy, European literature, and European history as existing in the absence of Europeans' colonial encounters and oppression around the world. It also suggests that the colonized world stands at the forgotten center of globe. The prefix post of postcolonial theory has been rigorously debated, but it has never implied that colonialism has ended. Indeed, much of postcolonial theories is concerned with the linger form of colonial authority after the formal end of empire. For Fanon, the end of colonialism meant not just political and economical changes, but psychological change too. Colonialism is destroyed only once this way of thinking about identity is changed successfully. Fanon as a post-colonial figure. Reader of Fanon will easily recognize his coining of term a psychology of oppression, which refers to Fanon's fearless examine of how life events and experience negatively affect the formulation of black colonized subject psychology from youth to adulthood. Fanon was an extraordinary thinker and a true intellectual outliner. He was an outstanding and dedicated physician as well as a philosopher and political activist. Fanon has made many enormous contribution to civilization as he changed Western scientists to consider their role in creating and perpetuating racism and colonialism. That is a direct result of rampant Eurocentrism in all domains of life. From the colonial era of French controlled Martinique, Syrah, the Second World War, Fanon's project in Black Skin White Mask then seems to be about tracing the interchanges between personal psychology on the other hand and social political forces of influence. On the other hand, they were the two main characteristics of his work. As a black psychiatrist and intellectual, Fanon documented the psychological place of black in a society that sees them as other. As a Fanon once said in Black Skin White Mask, I quoted, the progress is in the hand of those who are willing to get rid of the worm eaten rooted of the structure. I unquote. Fanon's postcolonial work. So, as we all know that Fanon write two works in a postcolonial theory. One is The Wretched of the Earth, which is published in 1961, and another is the Black Skin White Mask. And this works, Fanon propounding idea of a national literature and national culture, recognizing the significance of cultural nationalism. He formulated the three stages in which a nation culture is formed. First, the native under the influence of colonizers' culture seeks to emulate and assimilate it by discarding his own culture. Second is the native acknowledges the white disparity and discovers that he can never be truly white or white enough for the colonizers to treat him equal. Third, however, in the third stage, the native is truly anti colonial, accomplished by a critical analysis of his own culture. According to Pankaj Mishra, in his view, anti colonial nationalism was only the first step towards a new radical humanism for Europe, for ourselves, and for humanity. He had already distanced himself from the claim to a racial defining identity and culture. In the Black Skin White Mask, which is published in 1952, he said, Franz Fanon said, I will not make myself the man of any past. He also saw no point in trying to shame people through exposure to the grisly fact of slavery and imperialism. Am I going to ask today's white men to answer for the slave traders of the 17th century? So, this is the question asked by Fanon. He asked in The Wretched of the Earth, he warned the dispossessed against adopting a psychology dominated by the exhaustion, sensibility, sensitivity, and susceptibility. 60 years after its publication, The Wretched of the Earth reads increasingly like a dying black man's admission of a genuine impossibility, of moving beyond the world made by a white man. So, in Wretched of the Earth, also he was trying to say that colonizers were trying to suppress the people, mainly black people. In conclusion, Franz Fanon's enduring significance as a post-colonial writer lies in his profound insights into the complex interplay of identity, oppression, and violence within the context of decolonization. His thought-provoking ideas continue to shape the discourse surrounding colonials' legacy, systematic injustice, and the ongoing quest for liberation and human dignity. Fanon's work serves as a timeless reminder of the need for critical self-reflection to dismentality of oppression structures and collective communities to a world where all individuals can experience this exercise their rights to self-determination and equality. His writing are testaments to the enduring power of literature and philosophy in effective positive change and inspiring movement for justice. So, Franz Fanon's last work is Wretched of the Earth, and after that, he shortly died, which is published in 1961. And after that, in 1962, Algeria got the freedom. So, yeah, he fought for that, and he was not there to see that freedom. These are some works cited. Thank you for listening. Now I'm open for question.
Drashti, my question is that how did Fanon's writing influence the post-colonial discourse?
Yes. So Fanon was a major writer of post-colonial studies, and he was also trying to convince people or trying to argue that. How colonizers were trying to colonize the people of Algeria, and mainly the black people, and also there were colonizers were trying to impose their culture on that colonized people. So that's the thing that he write this Wretched of the Earth and also the Black Skin White Mask. So in that both of the works, he was arguing that how white people were treating this black people. Thank you.
Drashti, how did Fanon view the impact of colonization on the colonized individuals?
As I also mentioned in my presentation, that how colonized people, or we can say colonizers, they were suppressing the people's right. or mainly the right of black peoples. They were treating them outsiders. So their individuals also, they were suffering from this culture biases and other things. And colonizers were very rude, and we can say very aggressive towards the black people, and they were trying to impose their culture, literature, everything to the black people. So yeah, that's the thought of the colonizers of that time. I hope you are satisfied with my answer. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Gayatri Nimavat. On the third day of our presentation, I am going to deal with the topic marginalization in Coetzee 4. These are my personal information. This is the table of content. These are the topic on which I am going to deal with. So introduction. Marginalization is the process of being excluded or pushed to the margins of society. It can take many forms such as social, economic, political and cultural marginalization. James Coetzee's novel Foe is set in South Africa during the colonial era, and it explores the ways in which indigenous people, women and the voiceless were marginalized and oppressed by the European colonists. Coetzee portrays marginalization in four through his characterization of Friday, Susan Barton, and the narrative perspective. Friday is a castaway who is enslaved by Susan Barton and forced to tell his story. Susan Barton is a woman who is also marginalized in colonial society because of her gender and her social status. The narrative perspective in the novel is constantly shifting between Friday and Susan Barton, which allows Coetzee to explore the different ways in which each character experiences marginalization. This is about James Coetzee. John Maxwell Coetzee was born in Cape Town in 1940. He was the African person, but in his family there were the language was speaking is English, and he won Nobel Prize as well as Booker Prize, and he has as good acclaim as anyone to be the most significant living author in England. English, a language about which he has lately grown ambivalent. James Coetzee has spent half a century engaged with the biggest question of human reason and human dignity, but his novels are not what you had called grand. They are sleek, unadorned, unfailingly precise, most stop out at 200 pages or so. The sentences have been napped to their sharpest. Stylistically, his novels are quite brisk. Morally, they are heavyweights. Then, what is marginalization? According to Iris Young, marginalization is perhaps the most dangerous form of oppression. In this article, the in this book, Young tried to give 5 facts of oppression in which he tried to define the marginalization. He a whole category of people in explained from useful participation in social life, potentially then subject to severe material deprivation and even exterminization. The material deprivation is the major concept of marginalization in Young's view. The material deprivation, marginalization often cause certainly is unjust, especially in society where others have plenty. Contemporary advanced capitalist socialists in principle have acknowledged the injustice of material deprivation caused by marginalization and have taken some steps to address it by providing welfare and payment and services. The continuance of this welfare state is by no means assured, and in most welfare state societies, especially the United States, benefits are not sufficient to eliminate a large scale suffering and deprivation. Material deprivation is the most common result of marginalization when looking at how unfairly material resources such as food and shelter are disparate in society. Along with material deprivation, Young also says that marginalized are individually are also excluded from service programs and policies. Then marginalization in four. James Coetzee's novel Four, the theme of marginalization is intricately explored through the lens of both cultural and gender-based subaltern identities. The central character, Susan Barton, who has been shipwrecked on the island much like Robinson Crusoe, represents the marginalized other in a world dominated by men and colonialist ideology. This novel reopened two English texts in which the early 18th century tried to constitute marginality. First is Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, and then Daniel Defoe's Roxana. In Crusoe, the white man marginalized in the forest encounter Friday the savage in the margin. In Roxana, the individuality female infiltrates nascent bourgeois society. In Coetzee's novel, a double gesture is performed. In the narrative, Roxana begins her construction of the marginal where she is, but when her project approaches fulfillment, the text step in and remind us that Friday is in the margin as such, the wholly other. And this dialogue shows the marginalization of women in the text Roxana when she says that the very nature of the marriage contrast what in was in short nothing but giving up liberty, estate, authority, and everything to the man, and the woman was indeed a mere woman ever after, that is to say, a slave. Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak tried to define marginalization in four with three concepts, that marginalization of women, marginalization of voiceless, and marginalization in narrative function. So, when we see about the marginalization of women, the narrator of four is an English woman named Susan Barton, who want to father her story into history with Mr. Foe's help. Coetzee has trouble negotiate a gendered position. He and the text strain to make the trouble noticeable. This text will not defend itself against the undecidability and discomfort of imaging a woman. Defoe's idea of a woman dilemma here thematized as Foe's problem in writing the story. At first, Susan Barton imagines as a rejection. When she say, I write my letters, I seal them, I drop them in the box. One day, when we are departed, you will tip them out and glance through them. Better had there been only Crusoe and Friday. You will murmur to yourself, better without the woman. Yet, where would you be without woman? Could you have made up Crusoe and Friday and the island? Think not. Many strength you have, but invention is not one of them. Then, when Susan meets Tufo, he tried to question her on the details of the plot. It is a long series of questions, and Foe supplies the answers himself and tells her the structure of his storytelling, the female castaway. We therefore have five parts in all: the loss of the daughter, the quest for the daughter in Brazil, abandonment of the quest and the adventure of the island, assumption of the quest by the daughter and reunion of the daughter with the mother. It is thus that we make up a book: loss, then quest, then recovery, beginning, then middle, then end. As to novelty, this is lent by the island episode, which is properly the second part of the middle, and by the reversal in which the daughter takes up the quest abandoned by her mother. The island is not a story in itself, said Foe gently. So this was the marginalization of women. Now let's see the marginalization of voiceless. Here the character Foe, Friday, is the marginalized slave. And Friday's tongue has been cut off by slaver, says Robinson. Susan want to know him to give him a speech. And in this entire text, we find that Susan want to give him voice, but and give him voice. Susan is at her wits end. That too is a margin. Susan is also a margin as a gender, and Friday also marginalized as voiceless, and through this dialogue, the story of Friday's tongue is a story unable to be told, or unable to be told by me. That is to say, many stories can be told of Friday's tongue, but the true story is buried within Friday, who is mute. The true story will not be heard till by art we have found a means of giving voice to Friday. This shows the give a voice. Then, as we see that Susan is marginalized by virtue of her gender, and Friday is marginalized due to his race. In this context, Alec Bohemer argued that the violet body of the colonized speaks, representing its own silence. The colonized body speaks, uttering its wound, its negates, its muted condition. Friday's body speaks despite its silence and signifies beyond words, while attempts to give it a voice end up in appropriation of its own voice. It is normal for such a body to signify alternatively. Then marginalizes through narrative technique. It is interesting to notice what Coetzee stages between the inside margins of the first and second days of the writing lesson. While Foe and I spoke, Friday filled his slate with open eyes, each set upon a human foot, row upon row of eyes, unwalking eyes. Give me the slate, Friday, I commanded, whereupon, instead of obeying me, Friday put three fingers into his mouth and wet them with spittle and rubbed the slate clean. Here Susan also want to guardian over Friday, and through her dialogue, that how can Friday know what freedom means when he barely knows his name. Through this dialogue we can see this concept, and it is still in my power to guide and amend, above all to withhold. By such means do I still endeavor to be father of my story. Through this dialogue we can say that Foe and Susan Barton copulate for the first time. Then this all is about marginalization, and we find that marginalization from mothering, authoring, giving voice to the native in the text, a white male South African writer engaging in Susan's inscription outside the text. And then however lead to a scrupulous differentiate politic depend on where you are. Coetzee text can be taught as correcting Defoe's imagination of the marginal in comradeship, reinscribing the white woman as agent, as a symmetrical double of the author, situating the politics of overdetermination as a aporia, halting before Friday scenes for him here now, and for Susan Barton and for Daniel Foe. That is the arbitrary name of the withheld limit. So then an example, a narrative voice and the paradox of the unspeakable in James Coetzee Foe and his disgrace. This story is about one woman and one man, David, and both the woman was raped by someone, and the David wants to give voice to this girl, and like in the story of. Four, we find that Susan wanted to give voice to the Friday, and through this dialogue we can understand that how they she wanted to speak but she cannot speak, and to David, Lucy's refusal to speak her story is an admission of a feeling of white guilt for apartheid. He argued that she must speak about her rape because otherwise she will be indicating that she is seeking salvation through acceptance of her account of attack. David struggled to negotiate control over the symbolic meaning of Lucy's rape because to him her rape is part of his fall into disgrace. He regarded it as his own violation. Lucy's protest this, admonishing her father, "You behave as if everything I do is part of the story of your life. You are the main character. I am the minor character who doesn't make an appearance until halfway through." Well, contrary to what you think, people are not divided into major and minor. I am not a minor. I have a life of my own, just as important to me as yours is to you. And in my life, I am the one who makes the decisions. So, in conclusion, Four by James Coetzee explored the intricacies of marginalization through the lenses of gender and colonialism, reimagining the narratives of colonial literature. It emphasized the complexity of giving voice to the marginalized and highlight the power dynamics in storytelling. Coetzee challenges the idea of fully capturing the history of the empire and the lost voices of the marginalized. Through Suzanne's quest to give voice to Friday, the novel reveals the enduring complexity of marginalized voice. It urges us to confront the multifaceted nature and marginality and the roles of the marginalized as both victims and guardians at the margins of history. These are my work citation. Thank you. Now, if you have any question, then you can ask.
Gayatri, my question is that how does Coetzee's narrative style and structure contributes to overall exploration of marginalization in folk?
Coexist narrative style and structure contribute to the overall expression of marginalized by the mirroring of a marginalized voice. He tried to mirror the marginalized voice by the character of Susan and Friday. That Susan want to give a voice to the Friday.
Gayatri, my question is that in four, what does the concept of giving voice to the marginalized reveal about the power dynamics of storytelling and representation?
The concept of giving voice in four is to balance the power dynamic. Here we find that Susan has the power to giving voice because in this narrative technique she is authorized, and under her authority she can give the voice to the character, and this is the power dynamic of storytelling and representation. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Katariya Ghanshyam, and my today's presentation topic is market fundamentalism and its effects. This is my personal introduction. Table of content. In this presentation, I will discuss about what is market fundamentalism, uh, P. Sinat's views on market fundamentalism, free market and its dark side, example of Kisan Andolan or farmers protest, and about in agriculture, why agriculture shouldn't be left to free market, and conclusion. Introduction. Market fundamentalism refers to a deep-seated ideological belief in the magical powers of free markets to solve any economic and social problem. So, in the fundamentalism, the way religion is in central, and the power dynamics is about faith and religion in the way market fundamentalism is dealing with the central figure of market and those who rule the market. P. Sainath recalls in his article, then recalls that the term market fundamentalism is coined by Jeremy Seabrook. P. Sainath's view on market fundamentalism. Market fundamentalism destroys more human lives than any other simply because it cuts across all national, cultural, geographic, religious, and other boundaries. In the market fundamentalism, the approach of the market is wider, that it crosses the all boundaries of nation and religion, and it is available for all type of people, and that's how it rules the people. It's as much at home in Moscow as in Mumbai or Minnesota. In market fundamentalism, the range is wider, and it is the role it is play a vital role to reach the consumers, and the globalized, and the multinational companies is in the power in this market fundamentalism. There will always be doubters and kafirs, those who question the unbridled power of big business and corporations. In here, Sainath says that there will always be people who will oppose this market fundamentalism, because it will affect some people in a way, and those people who will oppose this free market and market fundamentalism, they will be seen as those people are seen in racism, in low position. Free market and its dark side. Just as free market can serve the public good by an invisible hand, uh, but the free markets will do something else too. As long as there is a profit to made, they will always deceive us, manipulate us, and prey on our weakness, tempting us into purchase that are bad for us. So the market, free market is always about profit, and how to grow how to gain the growth and percentage, and that's the main aim here in this free market. And it will allure people and do everything to make progress. That is also a fundamental feature of market equilibrium, in which supply and demand balance each other out. It will create a chain of supply and demand, and the demand will be increasing day by day, and they will also do this supply. That's how this chain will increase. The political system in a democracy is like a market system. There is a competition for votes, but that too has a fishing equilibrium. To keep their jobs, politicians have to raise money from the interest and use it for TV ads that show what nice folks they are really are. Here Akerlof is trying to say that the political system, the democracy, is also developing to become this market fundamentalism, where they also wants to be in demand, and they will do everything to lure people and become in their site, and be in demand to elected again and again. Cost of free market. Here I will discuss this advantage and some disadvantage of this free market. The advantages of this market fundamentalism are promotes political and civil freedom. In this market fundamentalism, there is less to do in by the side of government, and they have freedom in their conducts. Contributes to economic growth and transparency. In the free market, they have this. They can do growth in economics, ensures competitive markets, and they are always in demand and create a competitive market place where they can compete with each other. Empowers consumers by allowing their preference to determine market demand. They will produce and supply as per the demand of the consumers and their users. Supply and demand dynamics lead to resource allocation based on consumer needs and preference. Here also the preference of consumer is in center to gain growth. And some disadvantage are encourages survival of the fittest mentality potential, leading to disregard for public safety. Here the one who is more powerful, the one have the influence, and one can compete. They can only survive in this free market, and result in wealth inequality, with a small percentage of society holding the majority of wealth. This is the major disadvantage, that some will grow quickly and firmly, and other will be downsided by the growth of the others, and it will create an inequality and in the growth of the people and the wealth. Exhibits economic instability due to boom and bust cycle. It will create this norms and styles, and that will create the economic boom in the supply and demand market. Relies on theoretical assumption, perfect information, rational actors, costless transaction, inconsistent with reality. It will create a image of that marketing system, that it will give it will represent us like they are giving perfect information, and they will choose rational actors that are in public side, and they will do marketing, and that's how they are also giving an elusiveness into it. And this for this example is Kisan Andolan or the farmers protest that was in 2020 and 21 in opposition of the law that was given in the farm bills in the parliament. That was the law that law would have deregulated a system of government run wholesale markets, allowing farmer to sell directly to food processors, but farmers feared that this would result in the end of government guaranteed price floor, thereby reducing the price they would receive for their crops. So in this bill, there was no guarantee that it will only benefit the farmers. Rather, it will create only growth for those who will be in the position to buy the crops from the farmers, and it will reduce the guarantee, and they will be not sure if they can get the price that previously the government was giving to them. In that light of the farmers' protest, here is the this we can say the concern about why agriculture shouldn't be left to free market. The free market solution is, of course, patently suboptimal for the economy as a whole, as Keynes had shown. But let us forget the Keynes argument for the moment. Even so, the market solution is suboptimal in the case of agriculture for two distinct reasons. So those reasons are: the first is the price that would rule for agriculture good in a free market, far from being social optimal, are likely to be socially disastrous, and the quantity that would be produced of various agricultural goods, or what comes to the same thing, the land use that would result if agriculture is left to the free market, is likely to be socially disastrous too. Hence, there are wide price fluctuation around the level and at which demand and supply would get equalized under normal circumstances. If price falls to extreme low level, then the peasants get into debt with which they are then saddled with forever. And if price rise too high, then several consumers get edged out of the market, which in the case of a commodity like food grains can be quite disastrous. So it will be a disaster in both way if the farmers will not get the gain that they deserve, and so it will create disaster in the side of farmers also. If the price gets high and the supply is low, then the common people will be the one who will suffer from this. Conclusion: hunger is a function of anti-market system. Want more jobs? Free the market. Crisis, whatever in education or agriculture, is best dealt with by not dealing with it at all. Leave it to the market. Let the market decide. Some analysts now even see an intricately anti-caste character in the market. This way, if a free market will grow, all will be dependent on the free market, and it will be the loss for common people. There is no miracle the market cannot perform. Market forces, as Swaminathan Iyer argued long ago, are great for the environment. Market are green. We have learned more science there. Time magazine, Charles Kruthammer has laid down that while better off workers are abandoning the less fortunate ones. So when this free market is giving opportunity to workers, and that's how they will leave the jobs where they are given the low price, and they will always prefer to go in a foreign country to get more money. Hence, workers are abandoning the less fortunate ones. The market is rescuing the ones colonized. It is, in fact, the lifeline for previously starving third world peasants. So, in that way, if this increase, the third world countries and their workers always prefer to go in foreign land, and the globalized companies and organization will choose to give work to these third world countries, so they can achieve high growth in a very low price, based on the premise that the market is the solution to all the problems of the human race. It is too a very religious fundamentalism. It has its own gospel, the gospel of growth, and gospel of choice. So this way, it is becoming a phenomenon like a religion, and it is creating this growth and choice in the center. These are the reference. Thank you very much. Now you can ask me questions.
Ghanshyam, my question is that what alternatives to market fundamentalism have been proposed in economic theory?
The alternative to market fundamentalism, if we see that the world is already seeing growth and income in the free market, so there is no way that it will be closed, or people will look after another alternative for the free market. But there can be some restriction, or the moral, we can say, moral responsibility, those in power in free market, so that they can also think about those that are left behind.
Ghanshyam, my question is, according to you, how does market fundamentalism impact the well-being of marginalized or vulnerable populations?
In most of the in a large scale, we can say that market fundamentalism and free market is always in support of the large corporation and globalized companies, and it will always profit to those that are already in power, or those who are very ambitious, and will quickly gain the profit and growth, and other will always be in the low place to them. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Gopi Dervaliya, and today I am going to deal with this topic: race and gender in White Sargasso Sea by Jani. This is my personal information. This is the table of contents, and I am going to deal with this topic in my presentation. About the author. Here is the brief information about the author. Jari is she her original name is Ella Gwendolyn Reese Williams, and she was a West Indian novelist. She was a prominent English author known for her contributions to modernist and post-colonial literature. Her early life was marked by a multicultural and complex identity, as she was of mixed heritage, white Creole, Scottish, and Welsh. Throughout her career, she writing often delved into the experiences of women, particularly those on the fringes of society, and examined the impact of race, gender, and displacement on their lives. Her work is not for its vivid and evocative prose, as well as its keen exploration of the psychological and emotional complexities of her characters. So here is the how Giares gave her contribution to the literature through the theme of race, gender, and displacement. About the novel, here is the brief information about the novel White Sargasso Sea, published in 1966, which is a prequel to Charlotte Bronte classic novel Jane Eyre. This novel, often considered a post-colonial response to Jane Eyre, explores theme of race, gender, and identity in the context of colonial Jamaica. A well-received work of fiction, it takes its theme and main character from the novel Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. The book details the life of Antoinette Mason. She is the protagonist of this novel, Wide Sargasso Sea, and in Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre, she is known as Bertha. A West Indian who marries an unnamed man in Jamaica and returns with him to his home in England. Locked in a loveless marriage and settled in an inhospitable climate. Antoinette goes mad and is frequently violent. Her husband confines her to the attic of his house at Thornfield. Only he had grey spot. The attendant he has hired to care for her, known of Antoinette's existence. The reader gradually learns that Antoinette's unnamed husband is Mr. Rochester, later to become the beloved of Jane Eyre. So here is how race uh, gave the character in her novel, or also describe the struggle of her characters in the novel. And we know that her characters have as earlier I mentioned in my slide, that her characters have psychological and emotional complexities. Significance of race and gender. So the theme of race and gender are significant in White Sargasso Sea because they help us to understand the experiences of mixed race people and women in 19th century Jamaica. The novel also shows how racism and sexism can lead to violence and oppression. In addition, the novel is significant because it challenges the traditional portrayal of Antoinette in Jane Eyre. In Jane Eyre, Antoinette is portrayed as a mad woman. In the context of race, the novel explores the racial dynamics of 19th century Jamaica. The novel shows how racism could lead to psychological trauma. Antoinette, for example, Antoinette is deeply scared by her experiences of racism, and she often has nightmares and flashbacks. In the context of gender, the novel also explores the gender dynamics of 19th century Jamaica. Women were often seen as a property and they had few rights. For example, Antoinette is raised in a patriarchal society where men are in control. Her mother is a weak and submissive woman, and her servants are often mistreated by their male masters.
If women's work in organized differently from men's, if the day is structured differently, if space is inhabited differently, if styles of verbal communication are different, then it follows that women will have a different sense of beauty and pleasure. The first line in the novel set up the alienation of Antoinette's family, while placing the reader on a shifting ground. They say when trouble comes, close ranks, and so do the white people. But we were not in the ranks. The Jamaican ladies had never approved of my mother because she is pretty like herself, Christophane said. In this dialogue, they is both nobody and everybody, and trouble has no referent. Use of the phrase "the white people" suggests that the speaker is not white, but the next sentence lends uncertainty to the speaker's skin color. On the one hand, critics like Beneta Perry contend that we need to recover historically repressed knowledge and to construct the speaking position of the subaltern, a conception of the native as a historical subject and agent of an oppositional discourse. And on the other hand, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak and her followers emphasize that our very effort at resuscitating the subaltern's voice or self by invoking historical context reproduces the epistemic violence of imperialism. It imposes on the subaltern Western assumptions of embodies subjectivity and fails to acknowledge that the other has always already been constructed according to the colonizer's self-image and can therefore not simply to be given his or her voice back to Spivak and Perry both invoke wide Sargasso's representation of black Creoles to illustrate their respective approaches. So in these both slides, there is a argument between Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak and this Benita Perry view on the speaking position and epistemic violence. Antoinette Causeway, a mixed race woman. Antoinette, who is torn between two different identities, finds herself belonging to New Here. Here is the Howell said that realizing the dimension of her loss, Antoinette becomes a displaced person in her own country, entirely development on a dowry supplied by her English stepfather, and at the mercy of an arranged marriage with an Englishman who has been sent to the West Indies to seek his fortune. As the representative of the colonial power, the first thing he exploits or tries to anglicize is his wife Antoinette. His first attempt is to name her Bertha, trying to give her a new identity. Um, don't laugh like that, Bertha. My name is not Bertha. Why do you call me Bertha? Because it is a name I am particularly fond of. I think of you as Bertha. Rochester's calling Antoinette another name is his way of taking control over her entire identity, just like having legal control over her fortune when he married her. Antoinette's response to Mr. Rochester's is not the same when he called her Bertha for the second time. She says, Bertha is not my name. You are trying to make me into someone else, calling me by another name. I know that's obey too. Throughout the novel, Antoinette being regarded as neither white nor black tries hard to establish her own identity, which is shattered by the hostility of Mr. Rochester towards the end of the novel. She begins to feel lost and helpless, growing more dependent on her husband. Mr. Rochester is a racist. We all know that the British and colonized many countries, and the Caribbean is one of them. But here, the character of Rochester is shown as a different and a new type of colonizer who had colonized a Creole Antoinette. So here we find an oppressor who neither expects Creoles nor the black ones. Rochester's dominant identity is reflected in Antoinette's capture and his domination over her. There is nothing like identity for the poor woman, as Rochester destroys it and changes her name as well. By the end of part 2 of the novel, where he is leaving the Caribbean and going to England with Antoinette, and he utters that I had the mountains and the hills, the rivers and the rain. She had left me thirsty. These lines mean that he does not love the Caribbean people and their lifestyle, and therefore he is willing to go to England and to satisfy the thirst that he had. Women trapped in patriarchal societies. So even in this, even in this time also we can see this patriarchy in this time, and here race also portray the image of this patriarchy through this through her character Antoinette. For example, Antoinette Causeway is forced to marry Rochester against her will. She has no say in the matter, and she is unable to leave him even after he becomes abusive. Women are expected to be obedient and subservient to men. For example, Antoinette's husband expects her to obey his every command. When she fails to do so, he becomes abusive. Women are often defined access to education and employment opportunities. For example, Antoinette's mother is never given the opportunity to learn how to read or write. She is also unable to get a job to support herself and her daughter. Women are often subjected to violence and abuse. For example, Antoinette is raped by her husband. She is also physically and emotionally abused by him. Women are often blamed for their own misfortune. For example, Antoinette's husband blames her for her own madness. He also blames her for her inability to bear him children. Comparative analysis of White Sargasso Sea and Jane Eyre. Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre and Jane Eyre's White Sargasso Sea mutually manifest the emphasizes extent and consequences of British rule on the front as well as on the West Indies island. The effect of British power is illustrated in both of these novels via the use of two frequently recurring images that impart how Britain's rule affected women from each region. Jane Eyre of England and Antoinette Causeway of Jamaica find themselves repeatedly surrounded by fire and the color red. These symbols are used to convey a deeper meaning that over the course of each novel develops into a dissimilar foreshadowing of the same fundamental concept. In Jane Eyre, fire and the color red may be interpreted as symbols of emotional power, romantic love, and beneficial gain. Whereas in White Sargasso Sea, the same represents destruction, insecurity, and emotional and physically loss. As the result of the contradictory use of these symbols, two very different women's lives are fused together in such a manner as to make fortune seem based toward on and hopeless destruction, the regrettable destiny of the other. Both Jane Eyre and White Sargasso Sea, which are novels written by Charlotte Bronte and J.R. Rice, represents the women in any historical period of protesting patriarchy and oppression. To conclude, White Sargasso Sea by Jane Rice underscores the profound significance of race and gender in the lives of its characters set against the backdrop of post-colonial Jamaica. This novel skillfully unravels the complex interplay of identity, power, and social norm, revealing the ways in which race and gender intersect and shape the characters' destinies. Race work serves as a poignant reminder of the enduring impact of race and gender on human lives, making White Sargasso Sea a timeless exploration of these critical themes in literature and society. These are my work citation, and thank you. Now you can ask me question.
Gopi invites Sargasso to see how our individual countries by patriarchal societies based on both race and gender.
Okay. As I mentioned in my presentation, that women are trapped in patriarchy in society in the novel, and in a number of way, like they are seen as property, and they have few rights, and they are also deny access education and employments opportunities, and also they are blamed on their own misfortune.
Gopi, my question is, how is the novel White Sargasso Sea is a post-colonial response to Charlotte Bronte's Jani?
Okay, so in this novel, White Sargasso Sea, um, uh, this novel, White Sargasso Sea, is post-colonial of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, by presenting the untold story of Bertha Antoinette Mason, and the maid woman in the attic, and also it offers that counter narrative that humanize Bertha, and the provides the voice for the marginalized characters who were also who were silent, who were also not their voice, and so this White Sargasso Sea is a post-colonial response to Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre.
So, can I start? A very good noon to you all. On the third day of presentation season semester 3, I am going to explore the topic, which is a comparative analysis of madness and female identity in White Sargasso Sea and the mad women in the attic in the paper of the post-colonial studies. These are my personal details. And these are some of the points which I'm going to discuss in my entire presentation. The very first question arises is that what is post-colonial studies? So post-colonial study is questioning whoever is in the power or authority, and as we all know that questions always creates a kind of awareness among the people. Post-colonial studies also brings up a new way, and it mainly studies, it gives a voices to the voiceless people. So that is the, we can say, basic understanding or definition about the post-colonial studies. And beginning with the introduction of both the texts, the White Sargasso Sea and the Mad Women in the Attic. Reading the full title of the book, The Mad Women in the Attic, The Women Writer and the 19th Century Literature, is a 1979 book by Sandra Gilbert and Susan Goober. It examines Victorian literature from a feminist perspective. It is about an analysis of Victorian women writers and path-breaking book of a feminist literary criticism. Sandra Gilbert and Susan Goober reveals the origins of their revolutionary realization in the 1970s that the personal was the political, the sexual was the textual. Judith Schwelz in the New York Times book review called this book as a feminist classic work. So this slogan, the personal was the political and the sexual was the sexual was the textual, this is a slogan by by feminist writers, and it highlights that the issues of political and social can be explained in the content, in the content the way they want. It is not associated with the broader context of political and social. So that is how this slogan emerged in the time between 1960s and 1970. So that is the feminist slogan. The book depicts Jane Austen, Jane Austen, Mary Shelley, Charlotte Bronte, and Emily Bronte, George Eliot, Elizabeth Browning, Christina Rossetti, and Emily Dickinson. The title of the book refers to the character Bertha Rochester in Charlotte Bronte's novel Jane Eyre, who does not only suffer from madness but also serves as a double for the character of Jane. Gilbert and Gubar contend that Jane's central confrontation of the text is not only with Mr. Rochester but with Bertha and her manifestation of Jane's emotions also. Bertha Mason is the only true mad woman in the attic in Sandra Gilbert and Susan Goober's critical study. So the title of this book is taken from the Charlotte Bronte's novel Jane Eyre, and that novel is about the love story between Jane and Mr. Rochester. And in that novel, we can understand that how the love story emerges between Jane and Mr. Rochester, and that is how Bertha Mason became one of the important link between both the texts. About the White Sargasso Sea. White Sargasso Sea is a 1966 novel by Dominican British author Jane Rice. The novel serves as a post-colonial and feminist prequel to Charlotte Bronte's novel Jane Eyre. White Sargasso Sea, a masterpiece of modern fiction, was Jane Rice's return to the literary center stage. Earlier, she had her startling career and was known for her extraordinary prose and haunting women characters. With this novel, she ingeniously brings into light one of fiction's most fascinating characters, the mad woman in the attic from Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. This mesmerizing work introduces us to Antoinette Coetzee, a sensual and protected young woman who is sold into marriage to the prideful Mr. Rochester. Jane Rice portrays Coetzee amidst a society so driven by hatred and spuked in its sexual relationships that it can really drive a woman out of her mind. So, this white surrogacy is a very important work by British author, Dominican British author Jane Rice. It is written in the year 1966 and also published in the same year. This novel is divided into three parts. The first and the last part is narrated by Bertha Mason, while the middle part is narrated by Mr. Rochester. And according to Sandra Gilbert and Susan Goober, they argued that the woman right, as we know that the Mad Women in the Attic, that book examines the feminist perspective and feminist perspective, and that is why they both argued in the book that women have to write in a particular manner, because that time it was a society which is dominated by male. So that is how women writers have to write in that particular manner, and they have to portray their female characters either as an angel or as a monster. So that is how it books depicts that how this due to this male dominance society, it affects upon the women writers. From that perspective, we can take the example of Virginia Woolf. That Virginia Woolf also was a kind of rebellious writers, but due to the male dominance, she also have to suffer lots of problems. And in her biography, we know that she also suffered from depression, and she became mad, and she committed suicide. So that is how we can consider, or we can take Virginia Woolf's example as the mad woman in the attic. We can put Virginia Woolf in that category of the mad woman. The mad women in the white Sargasso Sea. Bertha Mason in the attic served as a warning to other rebelling women against the patriarchy social restraints. Her situation indicated that women must accept the social restraints in Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. Jane Rice wrote the story White Surrogacy Sea from Bertha's point of view. She gave a strong voice to Bertha Mason in the story. The story of Bertha is reconstructed through a feminist perspective in White Surrogacy Sea, where Jane Rice broke the authority of patriarchy and colonialism. She made the readers realize that Bertha's story is worth listening to. Rice saw the mad women in the attic as a racial and gender-based denial of voice. Bertha is not Bertha in Jane Eyre, but Antoinette in White Sargasso Sea. She is no longer a horrible mad woman in the dark attic. She instead is a very lively girl with her own spirits, thoughts, and love. So that is how the mad women in the White Surrogacy Sea, where Bertha Mason is the attic, served as a warning to other rebelling women against the patriarchy, against the society of male dominance and patriarchy. And in this novel, The White Surrogacy Sea, Jane Rice wrote the story completely from the point of view of Bertha Mason. And as earlier I mentioned that post-colonial studies give voices to the voiceless people, and also give voices to all the neutral characters. So that is how in this novel she also gave a strong voice to Bertha Mason, and her story is also worth listening to. The mad women in the attic, angel or monster. Patriarchal images of women who dominate Victorian literature typify the often debated binary oppositions, angel or monster. In 1979, Sandra Gilbert and Susan Goober made a breakthrough in feminist criticism with their work, The Mad Women in the Attic. The women writer and the 19th century literature imagination, according to both of them, all female characters in male-authored books can be categorized as either the angel or monster, as earlier I mentioned, that women are forcing that they have to only portray their female characters either as the angel or as a monster. The angel character was pure, passionate, and submissive. In other words, the ideal female figure in a male dominated society. In sharp contrast to the angel figure, the monster female was sensual, passionate, rebellious, and decidedly uncontrollable. All qualities that caused a great deal of anxiety among men during the Victorian period. However, Charlotte Bronte did not limit her characterization to this strict dichotomy between monster and angel. Jane possesses many of the qualities of the so called angel. She is pure, moral, and has a controllable behavior. Yet, at the same time, she is extremely passionate, independent, and courageous. She refuses to submit to a position of inferiority even when faced with a choice between love and autonomy. Moreover, Jane's childhood demonstrates much of the same rebelliousness and anger that characterizes the monster. On the other side, Jane is hence towards the end made to depict the ideal Victorian woman, and Bertha comes in as the supposed antagonist who must not who must not fit into this idea. Bronte's different representations of the two characters conform to the good woman and the bad woman divide. So that is how the mad women in the attic, angel or monster, we can find that Sandra Gilbert and Susan Goober actually they deconstruct the idea of that women particularly have to write in that particular manner. They both counter argue with that it is not like that only women have to write or portray their female character as an angel or monster, but they counter argue in that book, and that is why this book we can examine as a path breaking book of feminist criticism. And in that Charlotte, how we can say that how Jane characteristics as an angel or monster, or how Bertha's characteristic as angel or monster. So and Bronte's different Charlotte Bronte different representations of the two characters conform to the good woman and bad woman divide. So this idea of angel or monster, it divide our understanding that what is the characteristics of good woman and bad women. Antoinette's struggle identity. In Jane Rice's highly acclaimed novel, White Sargasso Sea, we notice that Antoinette suffers while she struggles to develop her own identity in the face of social, cultural, and racial rejection. Several factors contribute to the crisis of identity that Antoinette faces. In one of the article, Coetzee 2013 studies the fragmentation of Antoinette's identity and shows that how ethnicity, gender, social class, and status from the basic constitutes or dynamics of identity development. She states that Antoinette has a fragmentary identity that is constructed through various constitutes, this being her race and ethnicity, her gender, a post-colonized, and also because of shifting class and status. All these constitutes or dynamics help to the understanding of Antoinette's identity. Her struggle for her identity, belonging, and her existence began where she was just a little child, where she could not define her own self properly. She was marginalized not only for being a mixed blood, but also for being a female and for being the colonized objects, as will be explained later. Antoinette's Antoinette's identity crisis reaches at its peak with her marriage that has been arranged by her stepfather, Mr. Mason, and his son, Rochester. So, when Bertha and Rochester are married with each other, at that time we can say that it was a kind of marriage which is not happened in the because of love, but it has been arranged by a stepfather. So, there was no any kind of love in that marriage. The symbolism of attic. Attic means cage. Antoinette is isolated and trapped in the attic by her husband, Mr. Rochester, which reflects the theme of colonization and oppression. It symbolizes man patriarchy and and the society which is completely constructed by male. The attic is the place where Antoniette's descent into madness becomes more apparent. Her confinement in the attic drives her to a state of mental instability, highlighting the destructive effects of societal oppression and loss of identity. The attic also symbolizes the buried history and suppressed voices of marginalized history. Overall, the attic in the novel The White Sargasso Sea serves as a powerful symbol for the confinement, oppression, madness, and hidden histories and past of the characters. Concluding the presentation, both Jane Eyre and White Sargasso Sea represent the voice of women in any historical period of protesting patriarchy and oppression. No matter whether in 19th century or in the 20th century, women continued their searching for independence and equality with men. Bertha Mason is a typical representation of women as victim of both patriarchy as well as colonialism. Through rethinking Bertha Mason in these two novels, we can understand that there is not only one way to interpret the literary work. It is our ways of seeing and knowing literary work that make things different. Feminist criticism is a topical contemporary literature theory. So, in the conclusion, we can say that the White Sargasso Sea novel is open for interpretations, and the novel ends where Bertha Mason holding a candle in her hand and she steps out from her prison. But we don't know that what actually happened in the last part or ending part of the novel, so that not that we can say that novel can be interpreted in many different ways, and the madness of Bertha Mason. These are my references that I have taken, and now I am open for questions.
Hetal, my question is that are there any common symbols or motifs related to madness and female identity that appear in the both texts?
Yes, there are many common symbols that we can relate with the madness and female identity. We can compare with the madness and female identity, and uh, when we are talking about the symbol, the first very symbol is of attic, and which can be seen as a suppressed and marginalized voice of Bertha Mason and Jane Eyre. And in the novel of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, we can see that even Jane's childhood is also very traumatic, where her aunt is not taking proper care of her. And in the initial part of the novel, she can be seen as a very good girl, and her behavior can be controllable, but as the novel or work progresses, she cannot handle all that traumatic situations, and that is why she also how she changes throughout the novel, and that novel is about the love story between them, but in the initial part of the novel it is about the Jane's childhood traumas and all that things. So that is how in one or the other way we can compare some similar symbols in both the texts.
Hetal, my question is how the character of Bertha or Antoinette differs in the both of the works, Jane Eyre and White Sargasso.
Okay, so the portrayals of the character of Bertha and Antoinette different in Jane Eyre and White Sargasso. In the novel Jane Eyre, Antoinette it can be seen her childhood period is there, that where she was belonging, and what happened with her childhood, and about her mother and about her stepbrother. While in the novel White Sargasso, it is about Bertha and Rochester's marriage, and how Rochester behaved and treat how Mr. Rochester behaved with Bertha, and how she became mad, and her madness can be considered as in the attic. So that is how we can
compare both the texts. Okay, thank you very much.
Is it okay, sir? Hello everyone, I'm Hina Parmar and I'm going to deal with my topic Jhan is White Saragossos Interrogating Hybridity, reading in Jhan is White Saragosso Sea. This is my personal information. Those were some points which I'm going to ponder in my presentation. Jaris. Jaris, born Ella Gwendolyn Reese Williams, was a Dominican mid-20th century writer and novelist. She was neither European nor black but white and West Indian, an ethnicity which stepped her personality as an outsider. Regarding this exotic background, the opposing forces of society made uh, jazzing a different tune to life. The author lived a long life, but it was her childhood in the Caribbean that molded her personality as a writer. Crushed by the harsh nickname of the White Cockroach, Jam mirrored the West Indian heroine of her chief Devar White Saragosso Sea. She once declared, I have only ever written about myself. In her study of Rice's life and work, Carol Enger asserts that White Saragossa Sea is Mr. Rochester's story, but it is also, of course, Jean's story. It is Jean's wall story. Like an Antoinette, she also bent under the pressure of the colonial center, England. White Sargasso Sea. Jare's White Sargasso Sea is a prequel of Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. And in this novel, Antoinette is the main protagonist, and this whole novel is narrate her story. In 1960s, the decade in which White Sargasso Sea was published by Charis, con- coincident with the time when postcolonialism as a critical theory got popularity. This piece of work has been acclaimed as a advocate of postcolonialism by some critics. White Sargasso Sea was written almost as a protest against Jane Eyre, a novel written by Charlotte Bronte in the 19th century. Bronte created a character, Bertha Mason, who is the evil entity which lurks somewhere in the attic of Thornfield, where her protagonist Jane goes. The presentation of this helpless character appears to be rather unfair to Charis. Charis come to the defense of this woman about the presentation of Bertha in Charis. Spivak Gayatri Chakravarti writes, in this fictive England must play out of her role, act out of the transformation of herself into that fictive author set fire to the house and kill herself so that Jane Eyre can become the feminist individualism heroine of British fiction. At least Reese sees to it that the woman from the colonies is not sacrificed as an insane animal for her sister's consolidation. Reese gives Bertha a story, a background, and also explains to the reader why this woman become insane. Bronte explains her insanity rather irresponsibly by merely pointing out that madness was inherited by Bertha and also because she was too passionate. Reese threw light on the trauma experienced by Antoinette. Rice's name for Bertha is in White Sargasso Sea. So in this novel, the main character and protagonist is Antoinette, and she is a child of Antoinette and Mr. Coetzee. And later on, when she was married to Mr. Rochester, and this marriage is only happen for money. And at the end of the novel, Antoinette didn't get love from her parents and her husband, and she get mentally ill, and she trouble for and she mentally get ill, and she is not mentally stable at the end of the this novel. Concept of hybridity. Hybridity is the mixture of different culture, different races, and different social aspects. And this novel, White Sargasso Sea, Antoinette is one of the example of racial hybridity and cultural hybridity. In racial hybridity, she married to Mr. Coetzee, and that time they face trouble for their races, and Mr. Coetzee question Antoinette's purity of race. And when we see as Antoinette as an example of cultural hybridity, she is a child of uh, child of mixture cultural parent. Her father was British man, and her mother was another cultural from another culture woman. Hybridity is a concept popularized by celebrated post-colonial critic Homike Bhabha, is the creation of new cultural forms and identities which can be seen a result of the colonial encounters. Hybridity is originally a term related to botany, originally refers to grafting or different species into a singular one. Hybridity is actually the clash of cultural cultures, and these clash of cultures produce something new and brilliant, as the fiction of Salman Rushdie, Wilson Harris, and the plays of Wall Siankap demonstrate. Jani's Red Sargasso is one of those fiction which beautifully sketches to picture of hybridity. Hybridity also enable the post-colonial writer to negotiate the dangers of cultural binaries and the fundamentalist urge to seek pure cultural forms. Those observations are important for the understanding of Chari's novel Wide Saragosso Sea. Homike Bhabha, in his location of culture, he state that hybridity is the sign of the productivity of colonial power, its shifting forces and fixities. It is the name for the strategic reversal of the process of domination through diswoven production of discriminatory identities that secure the pure and original identity of authority. He further remarked that the display of hybridity, its particular replication, terrorizes authority with the rules of recognition, its mimicry, its mockery. Therefore, mimicry emerges as the representation of a difference that is itself a process of diswoven. Indeed, he considers mimicry as the post-colonial process of destabilizing the norms of the colonizer, which complicate the authority of the original. Hybridity in Wide Saragosso Sea. Homike Bhabha believes that the roots of hybridity are located in culture. He maintains that cultural hybridity entertains different without an assume or impose hierarchy. He has called hybridity the third space, where a dialogue between two different cultures is established and our sense of historical identity of culture as a homogenizing, unifying force is challenged. Rai's novel is the case in her discriminate with Bhabha's speculations in this regard. In fact, in White Saragosso, see to be a crawl of a hybrid is essentially negative. Suffering from trouble identity, the hybrid are mostly regarded as outsiders. This novel revolves around Antoinette's a hybrid female who is rebirth both within her birthplace, the Caribbean island, and later in England. Well, she married an Englishman, keeping the woman under close surveillance. We find her miserably drop to both black and white through West India, therefore belonging to everywhere, and nowhere creates a homeless outsider who is the targeted of hostile discrimination. As Helen Kerr rightly suggests that homelessness is the terrain of rise fiction, dealing as it does with those who belongs nowhere between cultures, between histories. But unlike many post-colonial critics, including Bhabha, Rai is hesitant to celebrate this hybridity and more is critical of its interests. The writer even points to Antoinette's fear of hybrid fear features when Antoinette is changes by birthplace biraxial boy. She depicts him as having a white skin, a dull, ugly white, covered with freckles. His mouth was Negro's mouth, and worst, most horrible of all. His hair was crickle and Negro's hair, but bright red, and his eyebrow and eyelashes were red. The white Sargasso also falls in the scope of Homepapa's notion of literary hybridity. In the essay of Mimicry and Men, Papa questioned the ambivalence of Western authority. A sign attempt to explain the notion of mimicry and hybridity. According to literary hybridity and the level of narrative form is fundamental to what we have know as post-colonial literature. Modern literary forms such as the novel and the short stories are modes of writing invented in the West. According to Missy Dame Kubistek, both the action of White Sargasso and Rice action in writing the novel speak for remaining to assimilate. Antoinette's review of the stages of her isolation, rejection, and alienation embodies her search for identity and place and culminates her search for meaning. Antoinette feels in between because she lives between the world of white European and that of black Negroes, natures, and she is able to move between them and mingle with those who live in each culture. But scorned by both groups for her difference. The identity crisis of Antoinette is caused by hybridity ultimately her to suicide. This act of suicide can be seen as the personal revolt of Antoinette, a resistance over her identity crisis. Antoinette's the difficulty in constructing an identity of her own, her submissive character from the beginning till the end, and the series of struggles she undergoes can be perceived from Erickson's psychological theories of identity crisis. According to Erickson, first step in a child's development is trust versus mistrust. Where the baby develops a sense of trust towards its caregiver, or a sense of mistrust if he or she finds them to be unreliable. The second step is autonomy versus shame and doubt. In this stage, success leads to autonomy and failure to shame and doubt. In the novel, those two stages remain vague and almost unreliable due to the fact that our knowledge of such events depends on what the narrator Antoinette can see and narrate. We know that Antoinette's father died when she was young due to the native hatred and discrimination against the whites. Antoinette's childhood was filled with loneliness, poverty, anxiety, and fear. And applying Erickson's theory, we find that Antoinette is becoming increasingly desperate in search for social acceptance. We know that when she was born and when she was born and some after some years her father died, and she was a single mother child, but her mother was always search for white men who marry her, and so her mother and it get high position in the society because her mother was a black woman, and she need a power and a position in that cultural high society. Hybrid culture causes psychological breakdown. Antoinette's insanity can be connected to oblivious desires. She considers her marriage with Edward Rochester as utter fiasco in her life, unfit to locate a brought together feeling of her of self in her associations with Annette and Christophine. Antoinette endeavors to search for in her new spouse. It's all owing to chaos of hybrid culture. When his underlying interest with her distinction has worn off and he finds out about her family ancestry, he draws from her living Antoinette and Edgy to win back oneself, asserting reflect and she thought she had in Rochester. She starts gradual weakness and loss of memory and internet's close relationship is called into question, and the pronouncement that character in Jan Ayer make about the origin of Antoinette's insanity. This is the woven dexterously in this narrative by the writer as he treats the issue of the madness. It was asserted by the Christophine that Annette become insane and mad due to her inability to assimilate in new culture. Those are the havocs of trans culturality which causes problems. Daniel Causeway is the opinion and has a different claim from what Rochester says about her in Jane Eyre, that she came of mad family and idiots and manics through three generations. We know that internet is married to Mr. Rochester, and this marriage is all about money. And when time passes, Antoinette and her husband have no such good relationship, and her husband always go away from her, and that kind of behavior disturb internet. And at the end of the novel, we know that she lost her mental stability, and she get mad. Conclusion. Antoinette sees her life becoming a repetition of her mother's. She was not only aware of the similarities in their situation, but really realized that her own experience is a further stage in the literation of the grown woman. Internet becomes the victim of her hybrid identity. Internet's review of her story makes it evident that the trouble and the tragic result is not only because of her mother's rejection of her or her husband's rejection, as Jani points out that Antoinette's psychological breakdown can also be linked to conscious expectations she takes into her marriage with Edward Rochester, which in the end are never satisfied. But it is her identity crisis, the society which is responsible for her disorientation. According to Missy Dan Kubitschek, both the action of White Sargasso and Rice's action in writing the novel speak for remaining to assimilate. Antoinette review of the stage author isolation, rejection, and alienation embodies her search for identity and place, and culminates in her search for meaning. Antoinette feels in between because she lived between the world of white European and that black niggers, and she is able to move between them and mingle with those who live in each culture, but scored by both groups for her differences. The identity crisis Antoinette causes by hybridity. ultimately leads her to suicide. This act of suicide can be seen as personal revolt of internet resistant over her identity crisis. So we get idea that because of hybrid culture, she is faced many trouble, and even she questioned for her her race and her character. This is some references. Thank you. And now I'm open for question. Do you have any question?
Hina, my question is that how does wide Sargasso Sea challenge or subvert traditional notions of identity and belonging through its exploration of hybridity?
White Sargasso Sea challenges or observe the traditional notion of identity, and w- w- in this novel, we know that in this novel, hybridity is the one of the major theme, and there were in this novel there were the people who have different race, who have different culture, and there were many classes appear in this novel, and hybridity, because of hybridity identity, the main character Antoinette faces many trouble, and she even question for her race and her character.
Hina, my question is that based on the exploration of your topic about hybridity, can you explain that how cultural hybridity influences characters in literary works?
Yes. In this novel, internet is the example of cultural hybridity and racial hybridity. In cultural hybridity, she is a child of different cultural people. Like her father was a British man, and her mother is her mother have different culture, when she is young, her mother her father died, and her mother is always on a search to find rich people and white people who marry her, and who gave position in the society. Her so we know that she never get attention from her mother, and when she get married to Mr. Rochester, there she also don't get love from her husband. So she is always isolated and always ignored from her parent and her husband. And at the end of because of this all circumstances, she get mad at the end. Thank you for listening.
So first, I think now in the next 2 days, we'll have to keep a bell for 10 minutes. And once the 10 minutes are, you have to end incomplete one. Because that once you'll have to upload, then you will be not happy to upload the incomplete presentation on your channel also. So stick to the time. Unnecessarily reading lengthy slides is not presentation at all. This is not known as presentation. And you are not teaching anything. Teaching is different and presentation is different. So that difference you have to keep in mind. When you teach, you have 1 hour time, at least 1 hour time or that. But presentation is only within 7 to 10 minutes you have to complete. So that way you have to decide your content also. How you make a selection of your content, which can be delivered within the limited time. You don't have to talk about everything that you have read in any article. What you want to say is very important. Like one, it is good that now you are not referring to study material side, but you are referring to articles, but taking everything from the article from beginning to conclusion, paragraph after paragraph, is also not a fair idea. You get idea from articles. Right? We've seen in Aarti, in Anjali, in last Hina also, Hetal also, many, where some of the articles are heavily found into all your slides, word by word, sentence by sentence also, so that you take ideas, but what you want to do exactly with that you have to tell, and only one idea you talk about, instead of bringing everything from several articles. Then text heavy slides. So you are making lots of this text heavy slides. For example, in this slide, if you see, then there are 20 lines in this slide, and there are 125 words in one slide. How can one read this if you are reading in a mobile screen? How will anybody be able to read such a text heavy, small, tiny fonts given there? So you have to see that most of your PPTs and videos will be watched in video on mobile phone by somebody. So can they read that small fonts? 125 words. If you see this, there are the various rules for presentation. There is one rule known as 5 by 5 rule. 5 by 5 by 5. It says that 5 sentences. Sentence should not be more than 5 words, and presentation should not be more than 5 slides. 5, 5, 5. It means that the entire presentation is in one slide. That is 125 words. It means the entire PPT is only in one slide, and we have like 20 such slides. And it will go for 20-25 minutes, a dull reading of that. Word by word, line by line. So that is what we don't call it presentation. And જે બીજું નામ આપવું આપી શકાય પણ presentation ન કહેવાય. So that's why people are now removing presentation. You will Google, you will find that universities are banning presentations. તમને એમ થશે કે અમને તો કે છે PPT બનાવો, બધા તો હવે ના પાડે છે. ના પાડવાનું કારણ આ પ્રકારના presentation કે જેમાં text heavy હોય and every word is read. Nothing else is taught, only line by line. That's why people say it is better to not to allow students to do presentations. So in many seminar conferences now they make a rule. You come and read, but don't make presentations. Because in presentation, everybody is doing dull reading of slides. So that you try to avoid in last two. Don't make it very lengthy, and don't read each and every word on the slides. Okay, so we had a few things to suggest. By and large, it was good in citing some resources, articles. Many of you are now working on the idea of in-text citation also. Spelling mistakes are still made in the topics that you have written in the spreadsheet. So Sargasso C is written in variety of ways. So see that when you put your timestamp, be careful that your spelling, Aarti's spelling is wrong. Bhavyata's spelling is wrong. Hetal and Hina has written correct spelling. So see this, if there is spelling error, then you don't forget to rectify when you put your timestamp in this. Yeah, pronunciation in Avani's case, Patricia, wo is how it is pronounced. WAGH. It's not wag. Wo. We had a very famous cricketers, Steve Wo, Mark Wo, WAGH. They are written as wag, but they are pronounced as wo. Patricia. C sound also is a very curious sound. Even like if you ask, I was asking to Bard to tell me how many ways we can pronounce C. And it gave this result that you have at least 4 it gave. C can be cat, C can be city, sir. It can be ocean, OCEAN, ocean. And that sure is coming here, Patricia, in this C. And it can be silent also. So that is one thing about pronunciating the name of the person who referred. That book was good. Metafiction you referred in your presentation. That is a good book to talk about. Drashti referred to Pankaj Mishra's one article. That was also good from New Yorker. Pankaj Mishra is also worth citing for post-colonial reading. Gayatri or anybody else, when you say this dialogue from so-and-so thing, like novels, when you cite things from novel, plays have dialogues. In novel, you can say, I quote, I unquote. You can use that. When you use quotation mark and you want to say, then you say, I quote. And once the quotation ends, you say, I unquote. And one good article by Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak was referred from Gestor article in her presentation. Ghanshyam also referred to a good topic and briefly completed on this idea with reference to the contemporary farmers' plight of the farmers there. Yes, Gopi had cited some of these sites which should not be cited. Like there are this book selling slides. So Amazon was cited, but that is not a good idea. These are book selling. You are telling that you have read something from this site. That is the reference. So book selling sites don't allow you to read the book. This also was cited. Norton's, W.W. Norton's book selling site. So this is where you can purchase the book. So don't cite book selling sites. Always remember this without failure to see that. You can go to this Google Books and get the citation if you want to. Create citation and it will give you also. Wherein you can see that which book, because this is 1966, the original one, the first one that was published in 1966. But because there are many additions to such works, lots of things are given. There are many editions of this book. So which year? This is 2016. So better to go to the first one if possible. Otherwise, any other version you can find. But there are many editions of White Sargasso Sea is found on Google Books also. So which allows you to read something that you can cite. You also were doing comparative study of this, and I think you referred to this article. As many of you I suggested, I'm not showing everybody's article which you have referred to, but most of the things you have taken from in that way. The article you have cited in the your PPT also, but relying only on that is problematic. I think this was in Hetal's presentation. Yeah, Hetal has referred to this one. But Gopi also was doing comparative study and she also was doing comparative study. But in Hetal's case, you have to again check your title. You are doing comparative study of that book, Madwoman. Now that is the study of this book. This one. So it gives lots of this Victorian literature and mad women. So you can't compare that two work. That is a study. So there is nothing to compare. Both are of different nature. One is a fiction, another is non-fiction. So there is no chance of any comparison between the text that you have used in the title. But it is this. If you use two fictional texts, then you can compare. Comparing a fiction with a non-fiction is no way that you can get any substance from that. So change your title, final title, you change that. Okay, fine. So that's are a few feedback on various things, and let us end today's session here.